this is a special edition of our webinars because we've got a special guest this time. We've got Esra Kucukciftci. Yes, that's so from Pricing Innovations. I was blown away by Esra's talk that I saw at a conference, and because it gave like a framework to think in a more portfolio manner about monetization and valorization of APIs. And I know how hard this is for a lot of our customers and for people in the community, because when we talk with people about developer portals, monetization is always this thing that one day, maybe sometime, we're actually going to get to actually doing. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff that first has to happen, and then like as the years pass, time runs out. Executives are less interested in APIs, or it's this technical thing that they don't really care that much about anymore. And then maybe that window of opportunity closes. So one of the things we've started talking about with our customers and with the community is that you need to be thinking about valorization, but not necessarily monetization, but at least valorization of APIs right from the start. You need to think about some way that you can show the value of doing APIs to business people. The cameras will be later after the presentation. We have like a discussion round, and then we'll have the on camera. This one right now it's webinar mode. So as I was saying, like that's thinking about how can you take at least some of your APIs and demonstrate the value of APIs in a way that also people that are not technical can understand, and to think in that perspective. And that's why I'm really excited to have Esra here, because her framework actually helps you to think about that in that way, think more in a portfolio way, to think a little bit more differentiated about different types of APIs, how to bundle services together into components, and then use that as maybe a way to start thinking about, okay, where are the parts that we should be charging for? Where should we actually be sharing revenue and things like that? But with that introduction, Esra, I'll give the floor to you. Again, thank you very much for agreeing to doing one of these together with us. I'm really excited about what you'll be sharing, and then also the question round afterwards.
Absolutely. Thank you, Christoph. Thank you for that kind introduction and the kind words. I really enjoyed meeting with you as well. It's wonderful every time when like-minded people and similar work comes together, and I'm really excited about the conversation today. So hello, everyone. Thank you for making time today. I know some of you are in the earlier time zones, some of them are later in your days. Really appreciate you all being here. So today we will talk about productizing APIs, and we'll emphasize as Christoph mentioned, we'll emphasize the importance of establishing an API portfolio architecture, and we will offer up a couple of ways, structured ways for thinking about commercial governance of an API portfolio. So a little bit about me. Let's see. Okay, that's working. So a little bit about me. My name is Esra Kucukciftci. Christoph, you did an amazing job with that. I am the founder of Pricing Innovations. We are a strategy consultant firm based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we focus on pricing and monetization of products, platforms, services, technology at large. I started my career in engineering, and later I held various product leadership roles with a few technology companies as well. So, I'm stealing my own thunder here. So we've been around for 10 years now, and in pricing, our work usually goes where the puck goes, as we say in Minnesota. In pricing, we tend to work on new technologies and opportunities where new thinking in pricing is needed. A disruptive technology comes and breaks the revenue models, or products start working together, and that requires a new approach. So we usually work on work in that space. So even in the span of only 10 years, we already moved across 3 different eras in how we productize and monetize technology. When we first started 10 years ago, it was the tail end of the SaaS era, where competition was still product versus product. So these products were mostly solving. They solved core functional problems. And then tech firms thought about product market fit and feature differentiation in their monetization. There was very little verticalization, and almost all revenue came from just product subscriptions alone. And then these product firms started to solve for larger scopes of problems for the entire lines of businesses and moved on to the whole era of land and expand. They started to sell to the whole, lines of businesses or other lines of businesses in the same firm. They focused on selling portfolios of solutions, which made integrations and interoperability really important. This is the era when middleware and integration platform as a service were growing. The individual products and the overall portfolio, they realized the products and the overall portfolio were working differently. So they needed new revenue models for multiple products to work together and as a portfolio. And as the scope of these solutions and portfolios grew, the need for implementation partners rose up. Integrated workflows were really the core way of working. So this is the era when channel partners and implementation partners became really important, and these portfolio companies focused on growing their partnerships, and they became more of a more vertically specialized solutions because of these channel partners and integration partners. However, most of the revenue still came from product subscriptions, even in this era. The next era, which we call competition 3.0, is where the competition is ecosystem versus ecosystem. And in this era, this is where we currently are still. Business platforms compete as network as a platform. Out-of-the-box connectivity is expected. Vertical partners are really key to growth, and they usually know the end customer a little better. And they want to co-innovate with the platform. They want to lead the conversation on what the customers are going to need next, and they usually do. So these partners, the ecosystem partners, also seek out to embed their own components to products and platforms. And in order to co-innovate with these partners, platforms are starting to productize their own digital assets, their data, their capabilities. And customers and partners, because of these components being productized, customers and partners can take this technology a lot further. So today, we're already building past this, even the 3.0 era, and we're really fast moving towards a post-product era where the scope of product is getting smaller. Like if you realize in those in the era from product to portfolio to ecosystem, a lot of the scopes kept getting larger and larger. The solutions, the scope of the solutions kept growing, getting larger and larger. But today, the operating model to deliver value is getting smaller and smaller. Composable capabilities, platform components, data operations, orchestration tools, connectivity, multi-step processing, composite services, extensions, applications, AI enablement, AI agents. Every single one of these things are being proliferated and being productized and monetized as individual offerings. So in this new world, everything is getting smaller. So we looked at how this is happening, because as these companies are productizing their components, APIs are the core building blocks for those components, and APIs are the powering engine behind productizing these components as commercial offerings. So we looked at how leading businesses of our times are productizing APIs. Every year we look, we do a benchmarking study on like where the technology is going and what people are working on. And this year we focused on how leading platform businesses are productizing their APIs. What are their company models? And we wanted to see if there were patterns and like where opportunities exist. So let's see, there we go. So most platform companies offer APIs as individual API products and services. They may keep the access to these API products restricted or include them as entitlements in higher tiers. Some offer APIs as add-ons and extensions and API packs. There are some that productize their data services and data packs, as well as insights and analytics packs. Some of the more verticalized platforms offer cloud API suites. These are like platforms that have vertical clouds. Web services and webhooks are still fairly common. Connectors and integrations are productized and monetized as add-on offerings or individual offerings in a lot of these platforms. And then of course there are first-party applications and third-party applications. These might be extensions of the platform itself or third parties building a multi-component application on top of the platform. Many large platforms now offer platform products, a services layer like SAP probably is the best example of that, where in order to have access to the APIs and API products, you have to have a subscription to the platform layer, and then that opens up your access to other capabilities and products that live on top of the platform. And then finally, they a lot of these platform businesses productize their developer tooling and services, which we're going to get into a few examples of that. Well, what we love about this whole productizing APIs today is that there is enough maturity to understand that you cannot monetize a digital asset unless it turns into a commercial offering. So, like, in the last 10 years, there was a pretty massive misunderstanding about monetization was seen as just like sticking a price tag on something. So now platform businesses at least understand that that doesn't happen. That doesn't just happen. So there is enough maturity to understand that in order to monetize something, you have to productize it as a commercial offering with terms of access, terms of utilization, terms of entitlements, terms around consumption. So at least that's understood. What is problematic is that all of this is happening everywhere all at once. So I'd like to offer a way of thinking about this, about how confusing this is to a user or a developer or a buyer. So imagine you are going into a supermarket for a snack. So you might get a banana, you might get a cup of soup, you might get some ice cream, popcorn, or cheese. So imagine all of these snacks and the candy and the granola bars and the sodas, all of these being all in one place. No aisles, no categories, no shelves. Everything is in one place. Now, imagine this supermarket that you just walked into started their business as a popcorn seller, and they figured out they could sell popcorn by the kernel, like one by one. And they said, oh, okay, this is good. Like, let's sell it by the kernel. And then they started to sell, 1,000 kernels and 10,000 kernels at a time. That's what an API service call is. That's how pricing per the API service call works. So this supermarket is now trying to sell bananas very similar to that they sell popcorn. They want to sell soup that way. They want to sell cheese that way. And that's what is really misunderstood about API monetization. A lot of these companies, a lot of technology firms still think of APIs as popcorn by the kernel, and they're trying to create all these additional commercial offerings, and the established way of selling it is the popcorn, and it's really difficult to think around their portfolios and API products the way that a soup is sold, the way that an ice cream is sold. And what's even more is that imagine the cost of keeping soup warm and ice cream cold next to one another. This is exactly what's happening in the API space as well. What I want to call out is that there is a reason why in the retail industry, category management and the experience in a store evolved the way that it did for all of these decades. And we need to look at our API portfolios in a similar way. Now, why does that matter? Because when we do, we can drive 10 to 15% of or more of our revenue from these components, but only when there's a commercial governance around this. And think about it in this way too. So when in the developer community, in the tech community, we think of developer experience as one of the most important things. Well, with APIs and component products and API products and services, developers are increasingly your buyers. And you need to think of the buyer experience and developer experience in very similar ways. It's not just about the technical documentation and featurization of APIs. It's also about the commercial governance architecture of how those APIs are going to service the developers' portfolios. So we have a few thoughts about this. We've been thinking hard about this, and we'd like to offer up a structured way of thinking around API productization and monetization. So continuing with the supermarket analogy, when it comes to platform commercial architecture, there are three layers. There are layers, categories, and products. And think of these layers like the aisles in the supermarket. Categories are the products that are grouped together by the way they deliver value. Like, for example, if you're looking for snacks, you know which aisle to go. If you're looking for cleaning products, you know which aisle to go. So think of categories in the way that the products that are grouped together to solve a particular or a similar problem in a similar part of your life. And the APIs are the same way. So aisles, the layers, help us navigate what we're looking for, and categories help us navigate their relative value, because an energy bar is going to be more expensive than candy. This is already well established. We need to think of APIs in a similar way. So when we think about the layers of a platform in a similar way, we think of the jobs that they do. So in our commercial architecture framework, there are three layers. There's a capability layer, there's a connectivity layer, and there's an extensibility layer. The capabilities layer productizes and monetizes your platform assets, technology, and composable capabilities. So the capability layer takes your platform further and productizes your technology assets to the people who can benefit from them and can continue building with them. The connectivity layer allows your partner network, your ecosystem, all the other integrated solutions and software products that you work with or your customers work with to take your technology further. So the connectivity layer is really your commitment to staying an open platform and open technology. The extensibility layer extends your customers' tooling and investment in your technology and allow them to create multi-step processing, automations, and last mile solutions. So what might the categories and products on each of these layers look like? Well, I want to share one way to think about this. Like, this is not the only way to think about this, but I want to walk you through an example of how these layers come together, what types of categories might exist, and how might we think about the products in each of these categories. So on the capabilities layer, on the platform layer, we might have categories such as API products, composite services, orchestration tools, developer portals, service management tools, and like AI agents, and so on and so forth. There might be many different other different categories and subcategories on this there. But the important thing that I want to emphasize is that the products in each of these categories must be grouped based on the similarities and the jobs that they do. For example, defining what an API product is versus what an API service is important. And API products and API services are not the same thing. So one way to differentiate between API products and API services might be their consumption patterns. For example, when you consume a weather API or maps or GPS coordinates or an open banking API that provides a just-in-time score for a customer's credit, these are great examples of services. You call the service, you consume it in real time, and you execute a data operation with it. So this is a great example of a service. But when you think about an API that streams an IoT device data or something like an API product like change data capture, those are products. They're not services. The user of these API products must subscribe to that capability to continuously receive that data periodically. It could be batch, or it could be real time, or it could be more periodic than that, or it may be event triggered. But a product is different than a service by the way it is consumed. And it might be one way to look at these things. Composite services, very similarly. When an API serves insights and analytics with data from your own data model, it delivers a higher value than an API which only services your customer's own data. So you can look at the value of or category of these products by the type of data that they serve. Is it your data? Is it your algorithm and your IP that enriches the customer data? Or are you merely servicing customers' own data in your offering, in your product? Orchestration and developer tools also can be a category of their own. We're going to dive into one example on this later on in a few minutes, where you can productize various services and tooling on your developer portal to incent the consumption of your data services or your composite services. And we're going to have a few examples of that. Similarly, service management tools, where perhaps your third-party partners are tracking the usage of their apps, of their own embedded components. Those can be productized and monetized as commercial offerings as well. And ultimately, AI agents in machine learning and automation related to AI can also be productized and categorized as their own offering. So when you look at the connectivity layer, with integrations and connectors, this is where most confusion lies. So the way to productize connectors is by defining what a standard connector is. When you define what a standard connector is, only then you can define what it is not. So for example, if you define your standard connector to be a two-way sync of customer data with standard level of instrumentation, then you can define something like an advanced connector where you are servicing more than standard data. Let's say your standard data services transactions, like sales transactions of a customer. You can think of the advanced connector to go beyond that. Maybe perhaps it's more granular level of that sales data. Maybe it adds the customer data. Maybe it adds the accounting data or reporting data on top of that transaction. So you can define an advanced connector in relation to a standard connector, and you can define it by multi-domain, like how many more domains of data you're connecting, or level of instrumentation on that connector, and level of customization on that connector. Next, you can define something like a process connector, where you can service, process, or enrich data. So perhaps you're taking customers' data and you're doing something to it. Maybe you're giving a detailed view of it, or maybe you're processing it against forecasts or against inventory levels. and you're servicing it as an enriched data. This connector is not same as a process connector, and this gives you an opportunity to productize it and monetize it at a higher level because you're servicing higher level of value. Next, you can define something like an aggregate connector where, you know, like this is the like Zapier of the world, right? Like where you're connecting to an aggregator of aggregator service where many other customers are being connected to your platform. And that kind of connector does something significantly different than a standard connector. Here's what I want to emphasize by this example. When you are thinking about productization or monetization, defining these commercial layers and levels is where you need to start thinking about, because only when you define something in relation to the other, you create an opportunity to justify its value and to monetize its value in relation to the other thing. And it gives you an opportunity to productize and monetize these products differently. Very similarly, in your application layer, on your extensibility layer, you can define what an application is by the type of data operation it executes. You can define them as horizontal apps or vertical apps. You can define it by the level of experience you build around an integration. Is it an embedded component? Is there a wraparound experience around this app, or is it merely an enablement? And also, is it whose data operation is it extending? Is it extending your platforms and your technology operation, or is it extending your partners, your connected software partners' data operation when you create an app? So these definitions matter, and in buyer experience, everything is relevant. Everything is relative. So a commercial governance architecture establishes these API products by, moving on, by value, persona, and scale. Another benefit of looking at your API portfolio as a whole architecture is that it helps define the monetization models to go with each of these layers. Like, for example, the capabilities layer is primarily targeting developers, and it scales by levels of access and usage. The connectivity layer primarily targets your partners, your integrated solution vendors, and it scales by number of connected accounts. And the extensibility layer takes advantage of customers' willingness to pay, because customers increasingly are not willing to pay for integrations and connectors, but they are willing to pay for applications that keep extending their investment in your technology. So it really targets the customers as your primary user of this layer. And the scale factor here is revenue share, because a lot of your partners are in this building these applications together with you. So all of this is to say, not only it is important to look at your portfolio architecturally and categorize them by layers and jobs that they do, but it's also important to align them with the monetization model that applies to each of these layers and the primary users of these layers. So I don't have a lot of time to get into all the examples today, but I'd like to highlight a couple of best practices from Siemens and Zoho. I believe Siemens did an incredible job in defining what an API product is, and I invite you all to look into their API product portfolio. And then Zoho, I'm going to call out Zoho for developer portal products. I believe Zoho did an amazing job in creating a set of capabilities and products for developers. But I also want to show you an example of what happens when you create all of these products, but you don't have a commercial architecture around it. So here we go. So when you look at Siemens, the accelerator platform is a really good example of API productization. So the way that Siemens defines an API product is a software solution to a business problem, which consists of one or more APIs. API product can be a standalone or an enhancement of a software product. So when you look at, and Siemens did an amazing job with their commercial governance. So when you go to the developer portal, like the way that you access APIs is through developer portal, but the way that you access API products is through their marketplace. So and when you look at Siemens and how they productize their API products, that's where the marketplace and the developer portal comes together. And some of these API products are standalone products, and you can search by the API product, service, solution. Some of them are accessible through something like Building X, which is an API manager for their building solutions, building and occupancy solutions. And some of them are standalone, and you can see their definition and explanations in a very structured and organized way. The other thing that I want to call out is this example on Enlightened Occupancy API. So this is basically capturing the occupant behavior in a commercial building. So the way that they explain what this is they give a good amount of example on, which APIs this is composed of, area occupancy by floor and by sensor. So in a lot of these cases, API products are composed of multiple products, and Siemens is highlighting that. And when you think about productization, it doesn't have to be one-to-one mapping. These API products are composed of multiple APIs, and your documentation and your productization can highlight that and explain that as a product. And this also gives you an opportunity to establish the value of a higher level API product next to a lower level API product, which again gives you higher monetization opportunity. The other example that I want to call out is Zoho, and Zoho is a great example in productizing a lot of amazing tools in their developer platform. So when you look at Zoho, you see Creator, which is building applications, custom applications. Catalyst is a pro code platform to build and deploy your apps. There's Aptix for your application analytics. Flow automates the business workflows. There is a QA engine. There is RPA, you name it. So Zoho, in their developer portal, productize a lot of these capabilities. So it's not only the capabilities, you can also have microservices under these capabilities. When you look at their application development capability, they have 5 microservices under it. For example, they differentiate between a connector and a data source. There's an AI modeler, there's an AI library, there are custom APIs to go with it. And each one of these have their own pricing scale and pricing metric. On the Catalyst, the application development tooling, in addition to the Creator, there are 30 different services that Zoho productized, and they deploy subscription, pay-as-you-go, freemium types of models, and there are different usage categories and pricing to go along with that. Every single one of them has their own scale factor, has their own pricing. When you look at their connections, they differentiate between user connections and system connections. So they productize their connections and API operations separately. And then also, when you look at their application analytics tooling, they have additional pricing mechanisms and monetization mechanisms of how these capabilities can be productized and priced. Well, what I want to call out here is that, as you can see, this is very confusing. There is not a unified way of looking at these things. Some of them are pay-as-you-go, some of them have a calculator, some of them have individual pricing plans, some of them have sliders, and you don't know if you're paying by consumption or by subscribing to a thing. It's very, very confusing. So the call out here is that, API monetization doesn't just happen. You have to productize something. There has to be a commercial way of interacting with an offering. At the same time, you need to have a commercial governance around it so that the way that developers and customers and partners interact with your API portfolio is a great experience, and it is understood how you will interact with each of these products and in what use cases you might utilize which product. So a commercial governance architecture really enables you to do that, and you need to look at this in a disciplined way. All right, so let's say you have a commercial governance architecture, you have an externalization strategy, you have mapped out your layers, categories, and products. You even mapped out your APIs to these to your new API portfolio. Now what? Well, what comes next is a question around how do you track these APIs? How do you track the revenue and monetization opportunity by these APIs? And the way we do that is another framework, which we call a contributor revenue model. Contributor revenue model basically explains your revenue streams and the types of commercial activities that create those revenue streams. So when you look at your API portfolio, there's direct revenue, which is like, revenue from subscriptions from partners or from customers. There is source revenue, which is the revenue that your partners create and lead and grow for you through their own interactions with the shared customer base. And then there's transactional revenue stream, which is created by transactional activities that happen through your commercial offerings. And then there is service revenue. So it is really important to map out the types of commercial activities that you will play with in the marketplace and how your APIs support each of those commercial activities. There are more than 60 different types of commercial activities that you can take part in. And it is really important to map out your API portfolio, your digital portfolio to each of these commercial activities, and to map out your APIs to each of these products and commercial activities. Only then you can actually start tracking the net revenue retention or net dollar retention from your customers. And this is the opportunity that is created by strictly by your API portfolio, in addition to your product and ecosystem portfolio. I cannot emphasize the importance of looking at your growth and revenue contribution this way. Otherwise, it is very difficult to organize what your portfolio looks like, organize the commercial activities around it. And it's also very difficult to enforce those commercial rules with partners and with your ecosystem. So just to wrap up, while commercial governance architecture and contributor revenue model and establishing those types of structured ways of commercially governing your portfolio is important, it's not that easy. As we work with clients, there are a few things that we see to be a challenge for most of them. The first one is that the culture and mindset. For product companies, your focus is on, working for your customer experience and creating additional value and benefits for your customers. And, in product world, we're very, very customer focused. In component world, you also need to think of your ecosystem and your partners and developers as customers, and you need to create value for those personas as well. And platforms and ecosystems only exist if they create value for their partners and beyond customers. And creating value for customers to creating value for your partners is a really tough pill to swallow for a lot of product firms. But it's really important. So that's one way of looking at value creation in a different way. And when we do that, the ecosystems and partners and platform can create 10x value in relation to what we're creating as a product or platform alone. And in order to do that, partners need to fully embed themselves across your organization in product and sales, product operations, and you need to incentivize partners to play along the way that platform works. And that's also a challenge for most product firms. And developer platforms are really leading the way and thinking in this. because they're the closest in terms of like working with developers as customers. And this is a really new thing for a lot of product firms. And ultimately, you know, establishing and enforcing a commercial governance is really important because we are so keen on thinking of technical governance and defining entitlements and features by technical governance. But if you start with commercial governance, it actually provides a really good input as to how your technical governance might work, and it eases some of the decision making on the technical side. So just to wrap up, and I'm really looking forward to your reflections and the conversation coming up. You know, it's really important to look at your API productization as a whole portfolio approach and align your products with the jobs they do, the personas they serve, and the scale factors by which they're grouped together. It's really important to think about these layers, categories, and products and the jobs that they do. And after we do that, it is really important to put them into a commercial governance architecture for the world to interact with them, and for that commercial governance architecture to make sense in your revenue growth. And finally, tracking revenue growth by a contributor revenue model is really important and a really easy way of understanding where growth opportunities are. And also it's a really easy way of driving each of these API products and digital products as a growth opportunity of themselves and by themselves. And as we think of them that way, we can really grow the net revenue retention from these digital offerings and API portfolios. With that, Christoph, I would love to hear some reflections, conversation, and questions, and let's see how this content resonates with folks.